Busy in the world we know, we rarely think about what lies beneath our feet. But every day we tread upon a universe of hidden wonders. Beneath a thin skin of rocks and soil, there's an inner world full of surprises. It's fascinating and dangerous. But as technology has advanced, so has our mastery of this, our last frontier. The Milky Way, a breathtaking galaxy, teeming with more than 400 billion stars and planets. It holds the secrets of the universe, keys to the breakthroughs physicists seek. Exploding stars, supernovas, can tell us much about the behavior of elementary particles, the building blocks of everything we know. Japan's Super Kamiokande is our eye on the sky. It's an immense observatory, sensitive enough to detect the arrival of neutrinos, invisible particles bringing information from supernovas far out in space. From Super Kamiokande's data, scientists are building up a picture of the most basic processes that govern our world. This astonishing, gigantic construction, with all its groundbreaking equipment, is situated not high on a hill, but a kilometre below the ground. If it wasn't, Kamiokande's work would be impossible. Only here, where non-neutrino radiation is blocked by the solid rock, is it possible to carry on this vital research. It's just one of the areas where underground technology has opened up fresh possibilities. For the underground world is the new scientific frontier. It's full of potential, but harnessing it has always been difficult and dangerous. We've had to master underground engineering, a process that began far back in history. The desert's arid, parched heat has always been a challenge to travellers. Near Wadi Musa, Jordan, a shaded narrow passage, the Sikh, winds between sheer sandstone cliffs. It's a desolate trail, but at its end lies something both extraordinary and unexpected. A desert extravaganza carved from the rose-red desert rock. This is Petra. And improbable as it seems, this was once one of the wealthiest cities in the world. It was the Nabateans, an ancient desert Arab people who 2,000 years ago turned this lonely desert spot into a thriving hub, a destination for Silk Road traders, whose camel trains carried silks, spices and salt along the long, dangerous route between Asia and Europe. But why did this implausible city exist? How did it become so rich? What was the secret of Petra? The answer was water. Petra had plenty of it because the Nabateans had become experts in underground water engineering. They built dams and conduits to channel water from the flash floods that periodically sweep through nearby dry valleys. From the Shami Mountains, they dug a subterranean canal 27 kilometers long, as well as pipelines from deep local springs. This carefully garnered supply went into secret storage chambers below the city, with concealed access points known only to the Nabateans themselves.
Servicing the well in the room.
The reason you can stand up here is
The extent of the Nabateans project was a surprise to a team of scientists from Brown University.
The cistern, I think, was very surprising when we first found it. We were expecting a smaller structure of a sort of light bulb shape. And what we got was a huge rectangular room that went on for 7.5 meters in one direction, 8 in the other, and turned out to be 6 meters deep. So, I mean, it was capable of storing vast amounts of water.
Not only was the water stored, it was filtered and the supply to different parts of the city regulated according to demand, all year round.
They had only a few weeks of the year, probably at best, to collect rainwater, and had to not only prevent it from destroying the city in floods, but had to collect it and channel it to places where it could be stored.
This accomplished piece of secret engineering meant that weary Silk Road travelers were assured of water for themselves and their animals. It wasn't cheap, but the traders came and they paid, and the city went from strength to strength. But eventually, as the focus of the trade routes shifted away, Petra's water was no longer required. By the end of the 6th century, it had become a ghost city, a silent, glowing monument in the desert sun. The Nabateans had discovered that water can be found almost anywhere. A staggering 30% of the planet's fresh water lies below the surface. More flows beneath our feet than in all the world's lakes, rivers, and reservoirs put together. Accessing it isn't always easy, but success can change the course of history. In the 16th century, the central Italian town of Orvieto was subject to 2 linked misfortunes: threat of attack by siege and chronic shortage of water. Both were remedied with a masterstroke: the building of the extraordinary Well of St. Patrick. It's 62 meters down to the water, nearly 500 steps in all. But the ingenious double helix design enabled water-carrying donkeys to go up and down constantly without colliding. With its infallible water supply, the well was more than an engineering marvel. It was a secret weapon against siege, regarded by its creators with distinct satisfaction. On its wall is an inscription that translates as, "What nature stinted for provision, application has supplied." It's a sentiment shared by the people of medieval Istanbul, a city whose strategic position at the crossroads of Europe and Asia made it a tempting military target over the centuries. The city was repeatedly besieged, but with surprisingly little success. The reason for its survival lay well out of sight. Beneath the city's streets, hidden from prying eyes, lies an enormous storage system, fed by local rainwater channels and aqueducts bringing water from beyond the city walls. It was all stored in vast cisterns, some as big as cathedrals and holding thousands of litres of water. The cisterns, still in use today, were built with recycled pillars and bases, taken from disused buildings and temples. They even recycled carved Medusa's heads. The Romans were famous for their prowess as water engineers, and they spread this knowledge around their empire, including to the outpost city of Zeugma, later lost beneath fields next to the Euphrates River in Turkey. Excavations by a team of French archaeologists revealed buried household pipes in near-perfect condition. Nearby, they uncovered culverts leading to a deep stone-lined cavity.
C'est étroit? Bah oui, c'est étroit, mais on passe. Hein. Il est pas bien large, mais bon.
Beneath the city of Zeugma lay an entire, fully preserved system of water and sewerage. Precision engineered, it linked all the buildings in the city.
C'est extraordinaire de précision et les blocs sont tous calibrés. Au nom d'un chien, une voûte romaine.
Ouais, une belle voûte.
Très belle voûte. On voit que c'est romain au premier coup d'œil, d'abord parce que le mortier, c'est forcément romain. Il n'y en a pas avant. Avec les briques en éventail, liées par du mortier, c'est l'invention de la voûte. Et c'est du mortier d'une solidité incroyable. Sa tenue. Il n'y a pas d'usure.
Putting anything underground calls for special engineering skills, and the most basic and vital of these is the art of tunnelling. The 18th century Industrial Revolution had presented Britain with a new challenge. There were heavy raw materials such as coal and steel to transport, as well as the manufactured goods themselves. Canals linking factories with cities were part of the solution, and a network soon grew up right across Britain. Inconvenient hills didn't stop them. They carried straight on by tunnelling through some of the planet's hardest rock. These tunnels were kept as small as possible. There wasn't usually room for a towpath. So the barges were propelled by leggers, men lying on their backs and literally walking along the walls to propel it. Dating from 1775 and still in use today, the Dudley Canal Tunnel is one of the oldest in the world and stretches nearly 3 kilometres overall. At the peak of its popularity during the 1840s, more than 40,000 boats and barges passed through this tunnel every year. Demand was so high, boats sometimes had to queue for days on end. The Dudley Tunnel, like most early tunnels, was hewn by hand, with pickaxes out of solid rock. Although tunnelling through stone was hard labour, it was at least straightforward. The rock was stable, and the tunnels unlikely to collapse. But tunnelling through softer materials is a more challenging proposition. London's crowded River Thames was crying out for a tunnel beneath it, but its unstable, porous subsoil defeated all efforts at tunnelling. Every attempt collapsed, literally. The breakthrough came in the mid-19th century, when the engineer Marc Brunel devised the shield method, in which excavation and reinforcement were simultaneous. It worked, but not perfectly. The river still occasionally burst through, causing deadly floods of filthy, polluted water. More than 20 people were killed as the team spent years fighting against the force of the river above. Gradually, the problems were overcome, and in 1843, the tunnel was finished. It is still in use today. London in Victorian times was a nightmare. Its overcrowded, polluted streets had no plumbing and were a stinking, filthy breeding ground for disease. Until, that is, an engineer called Joseph Bazalgette began a process that saw London finally catch up with the ancient Romans and emerge as a model for the development of modern cities. Bazalgette's great idea was to put services underground. His elegant, efficient project resulted in 880 kilometres of spacious tunnels. More than just a public utility, they expressed a new aesthetic ambition. Even the pumping stations were beautified. The neo-Gothic tastes of the Victorians were lavished upon new temples of hygiene. The impact of the new sewers was so dramatic that Londoners began a frenzy of underground building. Soon the city had become a maze of subterranean passages of differing size and varying functions. Gas pipes, water pipes, electric cables, all were buried deep beneath the streets. Anything unsightly or inconvenient went the same way. One of the more unusual sets of tunnels was built in the 1920s by London's Royal Mail. It housed driverless trains that shuttled around a 10-kilometre track below the streets of London, linking sorting offices and railway stations. At one time, they carried 4 million letters and parcels a day. But as traditional mail declined, the mail rail, as it was known, became uneconomic, and in 2003, it was closed. Today, city dwellers not only assume that all their services will be tucked away underground, they expect to travel that way themselves. For perhaps the greatest product of Britain's tunnelling fever was the London Underground, known then and now as the Tube. The tube stations came to mean more than just convenient transport during the Second World War. German bombing raids brought night after night of terror. For those Londoners obliged to stay in the city, the deep tunnels of the Tube became their refuge from the explosions and fires that surrounded them. Each evening, thousands of Londoners headed underground to spend uncomfortable but safer nights sleeping on the crowded platforms. Today, new lines have extended the system, which now carries more than 1,000 million passengers each year. In other cities, underground rail systems began to blossom. Like London, their stations reflect contemporary national style. In Paris, the Art Nouveau station entrances have become iconic symbols of the city. While the 1930s Moscow metro is almost palatial in scale, extravagantly decorated. Luxuriously ornate, it nevertheless houses some of the finest examples of socialist realist art, laden with political imagery. All underground railways have their challenges, but when an underwater tunnel is proposed in an area prone to earthquakes, the prospect seems too alarming to contemplate. Yet Turkish engineers are doing just that. Istanbul has a severe transport problem. Each day, thousands of workers and visitors must be moved across the Istanbul Strait, which divides the city. The solution planned, the Marmaray Tunnel, is part of a brand new 76-kilometre-long underground system, along which trains will run at speeds of up to 100 kilometres an hour, cutting surface traffic and massively reducing journey times across the city. The catch is that the tunnels, extending deep beneath the city as well as under the Bosphorus, will be a mere 6 kilometres from an active earthquake hotspot, the North Anatolian Fault.
In the next half a century to 30 years, it is about 70% possibility that an earthquake larger than 7 will hit. Now that's serious. That's really serious. You can do things to minimize the damage it's going to do to the city, because we will lose a lot of things that we consider precious.
The system's construction is uniquely designed to take account of the danger. The undersea section, 1.5 kilometres long, consists of a set of large connected tubes. Each is encased in cement and steel-coated, but designed to bend under pressure. The sections can respond to disturbance and possible flooding individually, and the soil beneath has been stabilized to a depth of 24 meters. As far as they know, the engineers have thought of everything. If they have, this will be yet another advance in our journey towards conquering the underground world. The English Channel has never been quite as busy as the Bosphorus, but for centuries it's been the most popular sea link between Britain and Europe. A tunnel uniting Britain and France had long been a dream. But the length alone, nearly 50 kilometres from end to end, meant that it seemed destined to remain exactly that. There was one attempt more than a century ago. In the early 1880s, a small exploratory tunnel reached a couple of kilometres into the channel before the magnitude of the task and public disquiet brought it to a halt. No such obstacles hindered the scheme that was finally approved in the late 1980s. Years of geological surveying work had revealed that it was possible to excavate almost the entire tunnel through chalk marl, a rock stratum relatively impermeable to water, as well as reasonably easy to drill. Nearly 9 million cubic meters of chalk marl were excavated, but they were put to good use. A new area, Samphire Hoe, was created at the British end. It houses the ventilation plant for the tunnel, as well as a new wildlife sanctuary, nestling at the base of the famous White Cliffs. The tunnel, considered one of the 7 wonders of the modern age, is now fully operational, and the train service whisks passengers from central Paris to the heart of London in less than 2.5 hours. The Channel Tunnel design features 2 railway tunnels separated by a road link, the service tunnel, a safety feature that more than justifies its expense. For tunnels can be dangerous places. There have been 3 fires since the tunnel opened, but due to the safety measures and the rescue tunnel, no one was killed or seriously injured. Lessons had been learned from previous fires. In 1949, an accident in the Holland Tunnel, New York, had pointed up the dangers.
A mammoth 16-ton trailer truck, heavily loaded with chemicals, exploded midway in the Hudson River tube and set off a chain of blasts and fires. Rescue workers labor heroically in the deadly gas-filled chamber where fires rage through other trucks and their cargoes.
Today's generation of tunnels incorporate a wealth of safety measures as standard. Tunneling technology has reached levels that would have astonished the early pioneers. These innovations mean that tunnel builders now take on challenges that were once unthinkable. The towering mountains of the Swiss Alps are a daunting barrier to any form of transport. There are roads through them, punctuated by tunnels, but they're steep, curving, long, and slow. Rail links are the same. There's been a partially tunneled railway through the vast Gotthard Massif for more than a century, but its route spirals slowly between the peaks. In contrast, the new Gotthard Base Tunnel, to be completed in 2016, passes right through the base of the Massif itself.
At the moment we are here at the north entrance of the tunnel here, and it's going flat through the Alps.
At 57 kilometers, it will be the longest rail tunnel in the world, and being straight and virtually flat, the route will be one of the fastest. The project is huge in scale. Even before it began, detailed plans were made to manage such a complex, data-driven scheme. It even needs its own water and power supply. The waste material, totaling about 24 million tons, will be almost a mountain in itself. The excavation uses a combination of methods. The hardest rock is blasted, using traditional dynamite in controlled explosions. But then things change. The tunnel is excavated by new machines, immense tunneling rigs controlled by computers. They're so big that the final assembly must be done on site. These all-in-one machines have multiple drilling heads, laser instruments, and hydraulically operated tunnel liners. They're masterpieces of modern technology. But the way they work echoes Brunel's shield method from more than a century before. As the cutting edges remove material, it is passed backwards, away from the rig head. A lining is then applied to the walls as the rig edges forward into the cavity. But perhaps the trickiest part of the project lies above ground. They're excavating in 5 separate sections, and when they join up, the fit must be exact. To achieve this, teams of surveyors are using GPS equipment to create a network of reference points, which are then used to constantly update and correct the path of the rigs.
Because you make only a small error or at the beginning of the tunnel, it will get bigger and bigger, and the longer the tunnel is, the bigger the error will be at the breakthrough.
Understandably, the breakthrough is a tense moment. So far, the tunnels have met up with only minute adjustments. A triumph for the surveying team. Once the excavation is complete, the tunnel is further supported with steel girders. Then the walls are lined with a thick layer of concrete. One of the triumphs of the scheme is that the excavated rock is being recycled by a newly invented process and is returned to the tunnel as its concrete lining. Once the basic tunnel is dug, there are still years of work to complete the structure. The concreting train, 450 meters long, lays the foundation for the permanent track. It mixes and lays the concrete base automatically, although the finishing touches are still done by hand. Projects like the Gotthard Base Tunnel show just how far we've come in making safe, positive use of the potential beneath our feet. But progress has not been as impressive in all areas. One impulse that has always driven us underground is the quest for the Earth's natural treasures. For beneath our feet lie minerals and gems formed over millions of years in the crucible of deepest Earth. Immense heat and unimaginable pressure produced the minerals and fuels that have driven our civilizations. Without them, we would still be, literally, in the Stone Age. The Earth also produces gems of such beauty that for centuries they have been prized far above the humble necessities of life. Men have risked their lives to extract the Earth's jewels. And where greed and poverty meet, expensive technology is rarely part of the picture. In Ilakaka, Madagascar, the discovery of valuable sapphires leads prospectors armed with only the most basic equipment to try their luck in makeshift mines. Once inside these narrow shafts, the miners, like Jean-Noël, fill bags with what they hope is sapphire-rich earth. Their only supply of air comes from a primitive pumping system. If they're lucky, they survive long enough to be winched back out again, to sift through the bags in the hope of finding those elusive gems.
Problema raiky zany tebitebiny ho vita soa ny androany fe zany fitadiavana zany da masaka maniraka de tsy maintsy voatery manao an'le zavatra zany satria tsisy asa atao fe tia nangana fandevoka tanàna zany.
The underground's riches have always come at a cost. Conditions in most mines are a deadly cocktail of risks, from tunnel collapses to floods, toxic gases, explosions, and fires. The coal mine in Centralia, Pennsylvania, USA, had already been largely abandoned when, in 1962, one of the most far-reaching mine accidents took place. A fire, believed to have been started by a burning garbage dump, took hold in the underground coal seam and spread remorselessly, reaching temperatures of more than 500 degrees centigrade. Firefighters were helpless, and the fire raged on and on for years, causing untold problems and dangers to residents.
In the middle of the night, you wake up because your carbon monoxide alarm is going off. You wonder about, is there a time I won't wake up?
Despite decades of improving technology, the fire still burns fiercely, half a century later. More than 400 acres are affected, betrayed only by patches of emerging smoke and occasional sinkholes belching steam. The area has been evacuated. Centralia is now a ghost town, and compensation wrangles between government and the erstwhile residents continue to this day. Because mining is so dangerous, miners tend to form close-knit groups. Many have superstitions or rituals to do with the mines, particularly in areas where investment is low and the mines, consequently, especially risky. In Potosi, Bolivia, workers in the zinc and silver mines are nominally Roman Catholic. Yet within the mine, they pay homage to a very different god. Mining here has a frightening reputation, as the miners know.
Es verdad que la montaña se va comiendo a la gente minera. Es como cobrar que la mina también quiere comer, pero come al humano, al minero, la sangre humana.
Working conditions in these mines are among the worst in the world, with the death rate double that of coal mining. The hours are long, the risks great, and the airlessness almost intolerable. But the miners have one source of comfort and strength: the presence of the pre-Columbian mountain god El Tío. There are LTO shrines in every section of the mines. It's believed he holds their lives in his hands and must be regularly appeased with gifts and offerings.
Pues no nos acordamos de él. Sí, algunos accidentes pasan, ¿no? Sí, pero siempre tenemos que acordarnos de él, porque es nuestro Dios también.
For the miners, LTO is the ambivalent essence of the mountain in which they spend the greater part of their lives. Both giver of prosperity and taker of life, his protection alone can keep them safe. "33 miners working in the San Jose gold and copper mine in Chile needed all the protection they could get when a thunderous roar heralded the catastrophe that miners fear the most. A dramatic collapse destroyed the top part of the mine, stopping short before crushing the miners' refuge, but cutting off all hope of escape for those trapped 700 meters below the surface. Rescuers flooded in.
En este minuto estamos alrededor de los 500 metros verticales, más o menos una profundidad similar a la que en este minuto. Acá tú te puedes dar cuenta lo que significa estar con la montaña arriba de la cabeza.
But there was little the rescuers could do. The ventilation and access shafts were impassable, and the area of the rockfall was unstable and threatening to fall even further. If this had happened just decades ago, the miners would have been given up for lost. But newly developed probe drills established that, miraculously, the miners were alive, 700 meters below the ground. The challenge was first to keep the miners alive, and then to find a way to get them out. A narrow shaft was swiftly set up, down which went food, water, medicine, phones, and a tape measure to ensure that they were slim enough to fit into a possible rescue capsule. As the relieved families settled down to wait, experts from around the world were working on a way to sink the rescue shaft. Eventually, they settled on a plan that could get the miners out within 6 weeks, but it wasn't an easy option. The shaft down to the refuge was not going to be straight, and it had to be big enough for a grown man.
So this will be the diameter of the hole, and inside this hole we will put a 24-inch casing. Inside that 24-inch casing will fit roughly about a 23-inch capsule.
But at last the shaft was complete, and the rescue capsule upon which all hopes depended arrived at the mine. The capsule, with a rescuer inside, began its descent. It arrived safely. The long wait was almost over. At last, after 69 days entombed deep in the earth, the first miner was raised to freedom, fresh air, and a joyous welcome. Time and again, the capsule repeated its extraordinary rescue mission until every miner had been brought to the surface. The mountain had relented. The technology had succeeded. And against all the odds, the miners had regained their lives. Miners venture far beneath the earth in order to take out its bounty, but sometimes we dig deep in order to put things in. On the island of Spitsbergen, Norway, the Arctic permafrost is the guardian of a very precious resource. Here in Svalbard, an anonymous-looking building marks the entrance to a vast underground facility known as the Doomsday Vault. Safe from seismic activity and protected from power failure by the permafrost, the Svalbard Vault lies deep within a sandstone mountain. But its precious contents are not gems or gold. Instead, it houses a collection of seeds from the Earth's trees and crop plants. The vault can house 4.5 million seeds, filed and securely stored in sealed packets, keeping them viable for hundreds, possibly thousands of years. This is the reserve gene bank for the entire planet's food plants, ensuring that the full range of their diversity is preserved, a safety net for the future. Just as Svalbard's permafrost mountain is ideal for preserving seed, the underground has come into its own as protection for high-level physics experiments. More than 2 kilometers below the surface at Sudbury, Ontario, Canada, is a laboratory known as SNOW for short. Shielded, like Japan's Super Kamiokande, from cosmic and solar radiation by the solid rock surrounding it, SNOW performs groundbreaking research into subatomic particles. It's known as the window on the sun, as scientists here are investigating activity at the core of the sun itself. The site includes a cavity the size of a 10-story building, the largest man-made underground cavity in the world. It can detect neutrinos produced by fusion reactions within the sun. They react with heavy water within the cavity to produce tiny flashes of light, recorded by photomultipliers lining the walls. The sun produces more than 200 trillion solar neutrinos each second, and many come in our direction, passing unimpeded through the Earth and indeed our own human bodies. But detection by SNOW depends on a completely clean field. Radiation isn't the only thing that must be excluded. Workers here are subject to an extreme cleansing regime.
If we got an amount of dust like that into our detector, it would just ruin it. It would destroy its sensitivity to the neutrinos by blocking them out with other signals. And so we have to build the detector with fantastic levels of cleanliness. We have to just get rid of all of this stuff.
These precautions mean that the SNOW laboratory is the least contaminated spot in the known universe.
When the SNOW detector was finished, the exact center of the SNOW detector has the lowest level of radiation of any point in the solar system.
Oh, wait.
In its rock cocoon, free from outside influences, SNOW is providing insight into the energy driving our solar system. But of all the underground scientific stations, the undoubted leader, and perhaps the greatest of all the man-made wonders beneath our feet, lies 175 meters below the French-Swiss border, near Geneva. It's a circular tunnel, 27 kilometers long. The Large Hadron Collider was built to answer some of the most important questions in modern physics. The nature of the fundamental particles that make up our world. The scientists here are trying to recreate conditions in the first moment after the Big Bang. They began by building the largest machine on the planet, an achievement of almost unbelievable proportions. Within it, temperatures range from 100,000 times hotter than the heart of the sun to colder than outer space.
So we're going to enter the underground experiment cavern. We are about 100 meters underground. Some of the technologies we're using did not exist about 16 years ago when we started actually designing these detectors and thinking about doing experiments at the LHC.
The machine fires subatomic particles called protons, traveling at close to the speed of light, directly towards each other.
So there's a beam of protons which comes at about this level one way, and there's a counter-rotating beam of protons coming the other way, and they collide head-on.
Each second, there are 800 million collisions. And it's the fragments from some of these collisions that the scientists are interested in. They only exist for a few billionths of a second, but they take us back to the process of the Big Bang.
So what we're trying to do is to find out what nature was like at that instant. We're actually at a point where only experiments can tell us what the way forward is.
At one time, it was feared that these experiments could lead us further than we intended. What if they propelled us into a new dimension, or created the state of nothingness known as a black hole?
These black holes actually evaporate as soon as they're produced. So it's almost impossible that these black holes can devour the experiment or Geneva or the Earth.
Deep below the Earth, the LHC experiments continue, drawing us closer to the biggest question of all. How did it all begin? As the pace of technological progress accelerates, the underground world is at last coming into its own. Its darkness banished, its dampness excluded, its instability countered. The world beneath our feet, already more complex and alive than most of us ever imagined, is set to become as active and productive as the one above.